Join Samantha and Hans at the next Macro to Micro Options Power Hour, held each Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Registration is free. Scan this QR code or click on the link in the description.
This has been intense, and we have a decision. We do not have a contested anything. We have Harris making a call to Donald Trump to concede the election. And it was very, very much, I would call it a landslide, in that not just the popular vote and the electoral vote, but all of the demographic categories moved to the red side. I mean, every single one. So of those who actually did vote. So it's clearly not contested, but Trump still does have 20 days out some sentencing, which may very likely go away for president-elect. But your VIX crush call, which really we just talked about yesterday in our Chase Live huddle with clients live for an hour and a half. I said, can it go to 200-day? And if so, when? It hit there this morning. So we had the big VIX crush that you were counting on. And then, of course, the melt up has, I believe, in large part triggered because the dollar just went absolute hot fire flames relative to other currencies.
So it was a bit of a perfect storm, wasn't it, for stocks these days? I mean, we've been sort of a little bit nervous. We've been talking about how everyone and his or her brother has been talking about this melt up. So it almost got to the point where you were wondering, can this really happen when everyone's feeling like one particular outcome is the most likely thing? But if you look at some of the charts that I'm going to show, you can really see that a lot of managers are underinvested and people have been generally kind of cautious. It's not that unusual. We've seen that the last few years where everybody goes into the next calendar year a little bit sort of nervous with lower expectations. And then analysts sort of spend the whole year kind of adjusting to the new reality of, guess what? The economy once again did not compress. And so I think that's kind of the big story. Of course, the election is a big story. Behind that is this sort of idea that the economy is still chugging along. And for whatever reason, rate hikes didn't really transmit very well into slowing things down. And so that's the reality of things. And we've seen this MOVE index remain very high in terms of that event. Whether it was good, bad, indifferent, sometimes just getting by past an event is enough to bring down those fear levels because markets just need to know. Sometimes they need to know. Whatever the outcome is, just tell me, is what markets sort of say. And so we've had that happen on the equity side of things, but amazingly, we haven't really had a massive pullback in the MOVE index. There's just a little bit more to go. And I think that's, of course, because we do have this big event tomorrow. So while it's party time in equity markets today, for the most part, not as much in technology, but few names, Amazon, surprisingly, because it's Bezos, but like we talked about yesterday, the results were so good. And then the whole Bitcoin complex went bananas. And but we still kind of have a little bit of a hurdle to get past. I didn't think we would get down here in the VIX, but I set up for a volatility crush over the next few days. So it didn't really matter whether it came today or tomorrow or the next day. The idea is that typically you get kind of a 10-day drop. After an election, you tend to get markets on average rally a little bit, a few percent. You get volatility markets compressing over the next 10 days. It doesn't happen immediately because that's not how volatility typically works. You sort of get this echo and it takes time for people to accept that, okay, things are okay. And because of what's happened since August, which is those very couple of stressful events that we had. And so we had this a little bit of a volatility echo where people are a little bit nervous about things. And we've seen that play out over the last month where equities haven't really been doing anything. So you kind of look at what equities have done, and it's a whole bunch of bupkis. We've got triple the VIX versus the underlying movement in the market. And so that's very, very high. So we haven't seen a market this quiet relative to a high level of VIX and the MOVE index and the various other asset classes that have drawn in some of this high level of nervousness. We haven't seen something like that in a number of years, but it happened. And for good or bad reason, right or wrong, here we are. We've gotten past one big thing. And so the reality is that the market, we can kind of see, we look at our little gamma levels here, which we sometimes like to touch upon on the show, is there really isn't a whole lot of gamma. So what that means is there aren't a lot of positions that dealers have to sort of hedge at the moment. And past this week, it gets very, very thin. Now that can change as well, because I think what you're going to see happen is you're going to see a lot of call sellers come in. So I used to run cover call funds and option overlay funds. And that's what we do, right? The next expiry comes along and you start hammering away at those upside calls, and that stuffs the dealers with all this option volatility. And all that means is that sometimes can temper some of the upside. So there's that idea that we probably run into a little bit of upper resistance. And then, as you mentioned the last few days, we are going to have to face the reality of yet another big event, which is Nvidia coming up in a few days. Do you think that's going to be pretty big? I kind of feel like it's
November 20th, and it's of course very big, especially since I have higher price targets in SMH. So even if we run up into Nvidia earnings on November 20th, I'm still bullish semis. So even if this outsized rally reaction on the Trump win, which is very much pricing in more tax cuts and removal of regulation, it's not really, I would say, tariffs and higher deficits and inflation be damned. They're very much focused on lower tax rates and fewer regulations. But for the most part, even if we have some chop and digestion, we are likely to start still moving higher in semis. So I'm still bullish for sure into Nvidia. And if we haven't hit those price targets, I'll be bullish through Nvidia earnings on 11/20.
Introducing the 3-part options course with Hans Albrecht. Get access for free by scanning this QR code or clicking on the link in the description. Watch the full options macro to micro power hour episode by clicking on the video here, and subscribe to LaDucTrading YouTube channel for more content.